Officer David Miller was a man forged by dedication and an unwavering sense of duty. His reputation in their small American town built on years of selfless service. But even more renowned than David was his partner, Rex, a magnificent German shepherd whose presence alone commanded respect. Rex wasn't just a K9, he was a legend, a furry local hero whose exploits in tracking lost children and apprehending dangerous fugitives were whispered with a reverence usually reserved for human saviors. Their bond was something truly extraordinary, a seamless partnership born of countless hours of training, shared dangers, and an unspoken understanding that transcended words. Rex was intelligent, fiercely loyal, and possessed an uncanny ability to read situations, making him an indispensable asset to the police force. They were an unstoppable team, the pride of the department and a comfort to the community. Their days were a routine of patrols, training exercises, and the occasional call for assistance, always handled with Rex's characteristic courage and David's steady guidance. Every time Rex's paws hit the ground, David knew he could trust him implicitly, a trust earned through years of consistent, exemplary behavior. Rex was playful off-duty, a gentle giant who adored children and would lean into David's touch with a soft whimper. On duty, however, he was a focused, disciplined professional, his senses honed, his instincts sharp. He had saved lives, prevented countless crimes, and brought a unique warmth to the often cold realities of police work. There was simply no K9 like Rex, and David often thought he was the luckiest officer in the country to have him by his side. Then came the call that shattered everything. It was a high-stakes drug bust, a tense, volatile situation in a rundown warehouse on the edge of town. Intelligence suggested a major trafficker was holed up inside, armed and dangerous. David and Rex were part of the initial entry team, their task to secure the perimeter and locate any hiding suspects. The air crackled with adrenaline as they moved through the labyrinthine corridors. Rex, ever vigilant, quickly pinpointed a concealed door. As David signaled, the door burst open, and a suspect lunged out, attempting to flee. Rex, without hesitation, moved to apprehend, a flawless display of his training. The suspect went down, subdued efficiently. But in the chaotic seconds that followed, an unexpected, horrifying event unfolded. A civilian bystander, someone David hadn't even known was present, suddenly rushed forward, screaming, seemingly trying to intervene or perhaps just caught in the crossfire of the moment. In the extreme stress and confusion, with his adrenaline surging and his primal instincts to protect David overriding all else, Rex reacted. He bit the civilian, a clean, sharp bite, before David could even register what was happening and pull him back. The aftermath was immediate, brutal, and swift. The bite, though accidental in its nature and certainly not malicious, caused a public outcry that spread like wildfire. Media vans descended upon the precinct, cameras flashing, microphones thrust at bewildered officers. Headlines screamed about vicious police dogs and unprovoked attacks. The police department, reeling from the sudden onslaught of negative publicity, had no choice but to initiate a full-scale investigation. Public trust, built over decades, seemed to erode in a matter of hours. Rex was immediately pulled from duty, his harness and vest removed, and placed in solitary confinement at the police kennel, pending evaluation. The cold steel bars and the echoing silence of the kennel were a stark contrast to the warmth of David's home and the bustling activity of patrol. David was devastated, his heart aching with a profound sense of injustice and responsibility. He felt as though he had failed his partner, that somehow he should have prevented it. Rex, confused and clearly distressed, whimpered softly as David left, his eyes pleading for understanding. The image haunted David, a silent accusation in his loyal companion's gaze. This was just the beginning of a fight David knew he had to win. If you're captivated by stories of loyalty, struggle, and unexpected heroes, make sure to subscribe to our channel. There are many more compelling tales to uncover. The departmental investigation into Rex's actions intensified with each passing day, casting a long, dark shadow over the precinct. Every facet of the drug bust was meticulously dissected, every report scrutinized, not just for procedural errors, but for any hint of a pre-existing temperamental flaw in the K-9 officer. Bureaucratic pressure mounted relentlessly, a heavy weight pressing down on David and anyone who dared to speak in Rex's defense. There was a palpable push to deem Rex a dangerous animal, a liability, and remove him from service permanently. The incident was quickly labeled as not just an unfortunate accident, but a potential reflection of an aggressive nature that had simply been overlooked. The media, always hungry for a sensational story, seized upon the narrative with voracious appetite. News reports painted Rex in a relentlessly negative light, transforming him from a hero into a menace. Headlines screamed about the vicious police dog and questioned the very ethics of using K-9 units in law enforcement if such incidents were possible. Public opinion, fueled by these alarmist accounts and a general misunderstanding of police dog training, began to sway decisively against Rex. David watched, helpless and furious, as the dog he knew to be loyal and gentle was demonized across every local news channel and online forum. David, meanwhile, fought tirelessly, a lone warrior against a tide of public outcry and institutional fear. He spent countless hours poring over Rex's meticulously kept service record, gathering every commendation, every successful apprehension, every instance of bravery. He collected statements from fellow officers, from community members Rex had helped, all attesting to the dog's exceptional temperament and dedication. He presented evidence of Rex's gentle nature off duty, recounting stories of the K-9 playing patiently with children during community events. Yet, he faced unwavering resistance from superiors who, understandably, prioritized the department's public image above all else. Their concern was damage control, not justice for a loyal animal. Rex underwent extensive behavioral and physical evaluations. Veterinarians confirmed his physical health was robust, a testament to David's meticulous care. However, the behavioral assessment raised significant concerns. Isolated in the sterile, unfamiliar environment of the kennel, Rex exhibited elevated stress levels. He was withdrawn, refused to engage with trainers, and showed signs of profound anxiety. The evaluators, seeing a dog under immense pressure and without his handler's calming presence, interpreted these symptoms as further evidence of instability, rather than the natural reaction of a highly bonded working dog separated from his partner and purpose. The gravity of the situation became terrifyingly clear when the possibility of Rex being euthanized, or, at best, permanently retired, was officially discussed in a closed-door meeting. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, shattering David's composure. The thought of losing Rex, not to a brave act in the line of duty, but to bureaucratic fear and public misunderstanding, was a torment he could barely endure. He felt a profound sense of failure, a crushing weight of responsibility for the dog he loved and had sworn to protect. Adding to David's immense burden was the formidable presence of Commander Hayes, a by-the-book superior officer whose ambition was as sharp as his perfectly pressed uniform. Hayes saw Rex not as a valued member of the force, but as a significant liability, a public relations nightmare waiting to explode. He was relentless in his push for Rex's removal, citing protocol, public trust, and risk assessment. To Hayes, Rex was a problem that needed to be neatly filed away, and David's emotional attachment was merely an inconvenient obstacle to be overcome. He began to apply pressure, subtly at first, then more overtly, making David's already difficult fight even harder. The air in the police conference room hung heavy, thick with unspoken judgment as the police board convened to seal Rex's fate. Commander Hayes, his posture rigid and his expression unyielding, stood before them, a towering figure of authority. He presented his case against Rex with chilling precision, listing every statistic, every departmental regulation, every potential liability. His voice resonated with an almost clinical detachment as he emphasized the importance of public trust, portraying Rex not as a dedicated K-9 but as a dangerous liability, a ticking time bomb waiting for its next victim. He meticulously detailed the financial and reputational risks associated with keeping a dog that had bitten a civilian, painting a grim picture of lawsuits and eroded community relations. The board members, mostly stoic and serious individuals, listened intently, their faces betraying little emotion, yet David could feel their collective leaning towards Hayes's arguments. David watched, his heart a leaden weight in his chest, as Hayes systematically dismantled Rex's reputation. Every attempt David made to interject, to highlight Rex's years of loyal service, his countless successful apprehensions, his gentle nature off duty, was met with a dismissive wave or a stern glare from Hayes, who frequently reminded him that his role was to observe, not to advocate. David felt increasingly isolated, a lone voice against a tide of bureaucracy and fear. He could see the doubts forming in the board members' eyes, the quiet nods of agreement with Hayes's unwavering logic. The sense of powerlessness was crushing, a sickening realization that no matter how hard he fought, the system was designed to protect itself, not an animal that had simply done its job under extreme duress. Outside the station, the community was a maelstrom of divided opinions. Protests swelled on one side, fueled by outrage and fear, demanding Rex's immediate removal, with some even calling for harsher measures. Banners waved angrily, declaring slogans like "No dangerous dogs on our streets" and "Public safety first." On the opposite side, a smaller but equally passionate group rallied in support of Rex, championing his heroism and advocating for a second chance. They held signs adorned with Rex's picture, proclaiming "Justice for Rex" and "He served us, now we serve him." The media, ever hungry for conflict, fanned the flames, broadcasting the escalating tensions and deepening the chasm within the town. The police station had become a symbol of this bitter division, a constant reminder of Rex's precarious position. Meanwhile, in the sterile confines of his isolated kennel, Rex withered. The once vibrant, eager K-9 was a shadow of his former self. His fur, usually gleaming, now seemed dull, his eyes clouded with a profound sadness. He refused most of his food, lying listlessly in his bed, barely acknowledging the infrequent presence of the kennel staff. The absence of David, the lack of his daily routine, the sudden cruel isolation had taken a devastating toll. His physical health began to reflect his emotional decline. He lost weight, and his once powerful frame seemed to shrink. He was a creature designed for purpose, for partnership, for boundless energy, and without it, he was slowly fading away, a poignant testament to the psychological damage inflicted by confinement and fear. It was during this tumultuous period that the figure of Mr. Sterling loomed larger in the town's consciousness. A titan of industry, his influence was undeniable, his decisions capable of shaping municipal policy and public opinion. Sterling, known for his vast philanthropic endeavors, was respected, yet his demanding nature and expectation of perfection from those around him were equally legendary. He was a man who valued reputation above all else, and the ongoing Canaan controversy, with its messy public implications, was undoubtedly on his radar. Though not directly involved, his silent judgment held immense weight. He lived in the grandest estate on the outskirts of town, a sprawling testament to his wealth and power. Mention of his young son, Ethan, was infrequent, usually as an afterthought, described by townspeople as a quiet, observant boy with an uncommon affinity for animals, a trait that seemed almost at odds with his father's more pragmatic, business-oriented world. Little did anyone know, Ethan's quiet observations would soon become the catalyst for an unbelievable turn of events. Mr. Sterling, a man whose public pronouncements carried the weight of an entire community's respect, had initially taken a predictable stance on Rex's unfortunate incident. His initial public statement, released through his corporate foundation, spoke broadly about the paramount importance of public safety and the need for accountability in all public service roles. While carefully worded to avoid direct condemnation, the implicit message was clear. Rex represented a risk, and such risks, in Mr. Sterling's ordered world, were unacceptable. He underscored the need for rigorous assessments of potential dangers, subtly aligning himself with the prevailing public sentiment that questioned the police dog's continued presence. His words resonated deeply with many, particularly those who viewed the incident as a breach of trust, reinforcing the notion that Rex was a liability the town could ill afford. David, scanning the headlines, felt a familiar despair settle over him. Another influential voice added to the chorus calling for Rex's removal. Unbeknownst to the astute businessman, his own household harbored a burgeoning dissent, a quiet, perceptive mind that saw beyond the simplistic narratives presented by the media. Ethan, Mr. Sterling's son, was a boy of perhaps 10 years, characterized by an introspective nature that often belied his tender age. He spent hours observing the intricate lives of creatures in their extensive estate gardens, from the busy scurry of squirrels to the silent, watchful gaze of a hawk circling overhead. Animals, to Ethan, communicated in a language far more honest than words, and he possessed an innate ability to discern their true nature, often surprising the adults around him with his insights. He had heard snippets of the Rex story from the television in the family lounge and from hushed conversations between his father and his associates. The images of Rex, sometimes portrayed as a snarling beast, other times as a forlorn prisoner, stirred something deep within him. He sensed a profound injustice, an incomplete picture. One evening, during dinner, a rare quiet moment for the busy Mr. Sterling, Ethan gathered his courage. "Father," he began, his voice small but firm, "about the police dog, Rex. I don't think they're telling the whole story." Mr. Sterling, momentarily lowering his fork, regarded his son with a mixture of surprise and mild amusement. "Ethan," he replied, a hint of patronizing patience in his tone, "the media reports are quite comprehensive. An animal bit a civilian. Public safety demands a firm response." But Ethan was unyielding. He spoke of how animals, particularly intelligent ones like German shepherds, acted instinctively, of how fear and confusion could distort even the most loyal temperament. He insisted there had to be more to the story than the sensationalized headlines suggested. He didn't just want to know more. He felt an urgent, almost spiritual need to understand. He was convinced Rex was not inherently bad, merely a victim of circumstances and misjudgment. His father, though initially dismissive, was taken aback by such passionate conviction from his usually reserved son. There was an earnestness in Ethan's eyes that was hard to ignore, a spark of genuine concern that touched a paternal chord. Reluctantly, Mr. Sterling promised to look into it, a promise Ethan clung to with surprising tenacity. News of Ethan's unusual interest somehow filtered back to David. A mutual acquaintance, a vet who sometimes treated the Sterling family pets, cautiously mentioned the boy's unwavering curiosity about Rex. David, who had felt nothing but crushing defeat for weeks, suddenly felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. It was a fragile, almost ludicrous hope, but a hope nonetheless. A child's pure, unbiased perspective might be the only thing capable of cutting through the bureaucratic red tape and public hysteria. He knew it was a monumental risk, a potential career-ending move if discovered, but he couldn't let it pass. He would have to act discreetly, outside official channels. Arranging a meeting for an influential millionaire's son with a quarantined, controversial police dog was unprecedented, a clear violation of protocol. But Rex was deteriorating rapidly, and time was running out. Through careful, covert communication, David reached out to the vet, planting the seed of an idea he knew was audacious. The vet, understanding the depth of David's desperation and Rex's plight, discreetly conveyed David's proposal to Mr. Sterling's household. The arrangement was made for Ethan to visit Rex at the kennel, a clandestine meeting, hoping against all odds that the boy's unique, empathetic gaze might just be the miracle Rex so desperately needed. The heavy steel door of Rex's isolation kennel clanged shut behind them, echoing ominously in the sterile silence. Ethan, a small figure beside David, didn't flinch. David felt a familiar knot tighten in his stomach, a blend of apprehension and defiant hope. This visit was entirely unsanctioned, a desperate gamble that could cost him his career if discovered. But looking at Rex, huddled in the far corner, a skeletal shadow of his former self, David knew he had nothing left to lose. The air hung thick with the antiseptic smell of the kennel mixed with Rex's own scent of distress. David had warned Ethan about Rex's current state, about the dog's withdrawal and potential reactivity, but the boy had simply nodded, his eyes fixed with a quiet intensity that belied his age. "Remember what I told you, Ethan," David murmured, his voice low and urgent. "He's not himself. Go slow. Don't make any sudden movements." Ethan, however, seemed to move with an instinct that transcended David's cautions. Instead of rushing, he simply knelt, a small, unthreatening presence. The kennel, usually a cacophony of barks from the other canines, was eerily quiet, as if even the other dogs sensed the profound sadness emanating from Rex. Ethan didn't rush forward. He merely observed, his gaze soft and empathetic. Rex briefly lifted his head, his ears twitching almost imperceptibly, his eyes clouded, lacking their usual intelligent spark. He barely registered their presence, a stark contrast to the boisterous, tail-wagging greeting he usually reserved for David. This broken spirit was almost more painful to witness than any aggression could have been. "Hey there, Rex." Ethan's voice was a whisper, surprisingly clear and calm. It wasn't a command or a plea, just an acknowledgement, gentle and without expectation. He slowly extended a small hand, palm open, not directly towards Rex's face, but slightly to the side, allowing the dog to approach on his own terms. David watched, mesmerized and terrified, his heart pounding in his chest. Any sudden move from Rex, any growl or snap, and this fragile hope would shatter, confirming every fear Commander Hayes had voiced. But Rex didn't react with aggression. He merely watched Ethan, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Ethan remained still, his hand outstretched, his patience unwavering. The boy didn't try to cajole or command. He simply offered a quiet, non-judgmental presence. Then, almost imperceptibly, Rex shifted. A hesitant twitch of his nose, a slow, deliberate lowering of his head. He began to move, not quickly, but with a cautious, almost painful slowness, dragging himself from the corner. David held his breath, every muscle tense. Rex's eyes, still dull, finally met Ethan's. And then, a moment that felt like a lifetime. Rex nudged Ethan's open palm with his muzzle, a soft, tentative touch. It wasn't a lick or a playful bite. It was a simple, profound connection. Ethan's eyes widened, a small, knowing smile gracing his lips. He gently stroked Rex's head, just behind the ears, a spot David knew Rex loved. And in that moment, something shifted. Rex, who had been inconsolable for weeks, let out a soft, almost imperceptible sigh. His body seemed to relax, his tail gave a tiny, almost forgotten wag, and for the first time, a glimmer of the old Rex, the playful, intelligent canine, returned to his eyes. He leaned into Ethan's touch, seeking comfort, showing a vulnerability David hadn't seen since the incident. It was a turning point, a revelation. David felt a profound wave of emotion wash over him, a mixture of immense relief and overwhelming guilt. He had seen the vets, the trainers, the behaviorists, all attempting to coax Rex back. But none had succeeded like this small boy. In Ethan's gentle interaction, David saw not aggression, but deep trauma, a misunderstanding that had stripped Rex of his spirit. He wasn't a dangerous animal. He was a deeply hurt one. This was not the bite of a vicious dog, but the reaction of an animal pushed to its absolute limit, then abandoned. Hope, vibrant and real, surged through David's veins. Ethan finally looked up from Rex, his face alight with a quiet triumph. "See, Officer Miller," he whispered, his eyes shining. "He's not dangerous. He's just sad and misunderstood. My dad needs to see this. He just has to." His conviction was absolute, unwavering, and in that small, echoing kennel, it felt like the most powerful force in the world. Ethan, still buzzing with the raw emotion of his encounter with Rex, burst into his father's study, a room usually reserved for hushed tones and weighty decisions. Mr. Sterling looked up from his extensive financial reports, a slight frown creasing his brow at his son's uncharacteristic intensity. But as Ethan began to speak, his voice trembling at first, then gaining strength as he painted a vivid picture of Rex, the frown slowly vanished. He described the dog's sorrowful eyes, the way Rex had gently nudged his hand, the profound sense of understanding that had passed between them in that sterile kennel. Ethan didn't just relay facts. He conveyed the palpable sadness and surprising gentleness he had witnessed, arguing passionately that Rex was not dangerous, merely broken by isolation and misunderstanding. He appealed directly to his father's deep-seated sense of fairness, a trait Ethan knew lay beneath the demanding exterior. He spoke of how a creature so loyal and brave could be so utterly devastated by human judgment. Mr. Sterling listened, initially with a practiced skepticism, accustomed to the emotional pleas that often accompanied requests for his influence or charity. Yet something in Ethan's voice, the genuine conviction and the noticeable transformation in his usually reserved son, began to chip away at his carefully constructed public persona. Ethan, who rarely showed such fervent emotion, was clearly deeply affected. The boy's usually quiet demeanor had been replaced by an almost fierce protectiveness for the animal. Mr. Sterling saw not just an appeal for a dog, but a demonstration of profound empathy from his son, an empathy that resonated deeply within him, stirring something he hadn't felt in years. He saw his values he tried to instill in Ethan, being mirrored back to him in an unexpected way. After a long moment of contemplative silence, a silence filled only by Ethan's quickened breathing, Mr. Sterling nodded slowly. "Son," he began, his voice softer than usual, "if what you say is true, then we have a moral obligation to ensure justice is served, not just for the animal, but for what it represents." He agreed to investigate further, a decision that would send ripples throughout the small town. True to his word, Mr. Sterling launched his own discreet but thorough investigation. He leveraged his extensive network, not just for information, but to subtly open doors that had previously been slammed shut. He began by contacting his own legal team, instructing them to meticulously review all public records pertaining to the drug bust and Rex's handler, Officer Miller. He arranged for private investigators to gather independent reports from witnesses, cross-referencing their initial statements with newly acquired details. What emerged was a clearer, more nuanced picture than the sensationalized headlines had painted. He discovered several inconsistencies in the initial witness accounts, particularly regarding the civilian bystanders' movements. It became evident that the bystander, a young man caught up in the chaos, had indeed made a sudden, unexpected move towards the apprehending dog, a move that, in the heightened tension of the moment, could easily have been misinterpreted by Rex as a direct threat to his handler or himself. Mr. Sterling realized that Rex had not acted with premeditated aggression, but rather reacted instinctively in a highly volatile situation, a reflex honed by years of training for protection. Armed with this newfound understanding, and with a quiet determination fueled by his son's unwavering belief, Mr. Sterling began to subtly apply his considerable influence. He initiated private, unannounced meetings with key members of the city council, dropping carefully worded suggestions about the importance of due process and the potential for public relations disasters stemming from hasty decisions. He had quiet conversations with influential figures within the police department, suggesting a thorough reevaluation of the incident, hinting at discrepancies he had uncovered. His approach was not confrontational, but rather persuasive, presenting his findings as a matter of civic duty and upholding the town's reputation. The political pressure, once solely focused on condemning Rex, began to shift, slowly but inexorably, towards demanding a more impartial review of the facts. The tide, imperceptibly at first, was beginning to turn, all because a quiet boy insisted on seeing the truth. Due to Mr. Sterling's meticulously applied pressure and the undeniable weight of his influence, the police board, after a series of tense and ultimately unavoidable discussions, reluctantly agreed to a full reevaluation of Rex's case. This was not a quick decision. It involved internal debates, legal consultations, and no small amount of political maneuvering behind closed doors. Commander Hayes, still firmly entrenched in his belief that Rex was a liability, fought against it, but even he could not withstand the combined force of Mr. Sterling's subtle yet powerful advocacy and the growing unease within the council regarding the perceived arbitrariness of the initial judgment. The board recognized that a public perception of injustice would be far more damaging than revisiting a controversial decision. A new, independent behavioral assessment was ordered, overseen by an external K-9 expert from a renowned national dog training institute, ensuring objectivity that had been sorely lacking in prior evaluations. During this critical reevaluation phase, Officer David Miller, empowered by Mr. Sterling's support and newfound hope, presented a cache of new evidence he had painstakingly gathered. This included not only his own detailed incident report, which had been previously downplayed, but also crucial security footage from a nearby storefront that captured a broader, clearer perspective of the drug bust. This footage, initially overlooked due to its peripheral nature, proved invaluable. It distinctly showed the civilian bystander in his panicked attempt to retrieve a dropped item, making an abrupt, lunging movement directly into Rex's immediate vicinity, just as the dog was engaging the suspect. The angle and timing clarified unequivocally that Rex's bite, while regrettable, was a direct instinctive response to what appeared to be an unprovoked attack on his handler during a high-stress apprehension. It was a textbook defensive action, not an act of malice or uncontrolled aggression. David's calm, factual presentation, devoid of the emotional pleas he had previously resorted to, resonated with the now more receptive board members. The carefully orchestrated revelation of this new evidence, coupled with Mr. Sterling's strategic use of his public platform, swiftly began to shift public opinion. Mr. Sterling issued a surprisingly candid statement to the local press, not only detailing his son Ethan's profound experience with Rex in isolation, but also outlining the discrepancies he himself had uncovered in the initial investigation. He didn't just defend Rex, he defended the principle of fairness and the importance of due process. The media, ever keen for a fresh angle, particularly one involving a prominent millionaire, seized upon the story. No longer was Rex merely the biting police dog. He was now the hero dog unjustly accused, whose innocence was championed by a small boy and his influential father. The narrative swung dramatically back in Rex's favor, portraying him as a victim of circumstance and premature judgment. Editorials questioned the haste of the initial decisions, and local news channels ran heartwarming segments about Ethan's bond with the beleaguered K9. This seismic shift in public and official perception did not leave Commander Hayes unscathed. His rigid stance against Rex, his unwavering insistence on the dog's immediate removal, and his perceived dismissal of David's earlier pleas now came under intense scrutiny. Colleagues and council members began to question his judgment, not just in this specific case, but in his broader leadership style. He faced internal reprimands for mishandling critical information and for prioritizing departmental image over a thorough investigation. His position, once seemingly unassailable, was significantly weakened, his authority chipped away by the undeniable force of truth and public sentiment. The once powerful commander found himself on the defensive, his arguments unraveling in the face of irrefutable evidence and the growing public outcry for justice. It became vividly clear that the entire turn of events, this unexpected reversal of fate for Rex, had been catalyzed by a simple, profound truth: that a millionaire's son had insisted on sitting alone with a dog everyone else had abandoned. Ethan's quiet courage had become the ripple that turned into a wave, washing away the prejudice and misunderstanding that had almost cost Rex his life. The subtle shift orchestrated by Mr. Sterling culminated in a pivotal meeting of the police board, presented with overwhelming new evidence, including the security footage that definitively clarified the civilian's erratic movement and the independent witness reports Mr. Sterling's team had compiled. The board members had little choice but to reconsider their initial, hurried judgment. The narrative had moved beyond simple public opinion. It was now about factual accuracy and due process. After hours of careful deliberation, and with public sentiment now largely swayed back in Rex's favor, the board made its announcement. Rex was officially cleared of intentional aggression. His actions were deemed a reactive, instinctual response in a rapidly unfolding, high-stress situation, not indicative of a fundamentally dangerous temperament. Rex would be reinstated to active duty, albeit initially under a probationary period, and with the understanding that he would undergo additional specialized training to help him reintegrate and manage stress responses more effectively. It was a victory hard won, a testament to the power of truth and persistence. The news reached David like a surge of pure, unadulterated relief, washing away months of gnawing worry and despair. He rushed to the kennel, his heart pounding with anticipation. As the heavy steel door to Rex's isolated enclosure slowly swung open, a profound silence filled the air, broken only by the soft click of the latch. Rex, initially hesitant and wary, looked up, his ears twitching. When his eyes met David's, the years of shared experiences, the unspoken bond, instantly reignited. With a joyous bark that resonated through the quiet facility, Rex launched himself forward, burying his head against David's chest, tail wagging furiously. David knelt, his hands stroking the familiar fur, tears blurring his vision. The intelligent, loyal K9 he knew and loved was finally returning to him, not just physically, but in spirit. It was a heartwarming reunion, a vivid reminder of the unbreakable bond they shared, a partnership forged in trust and mutual respect. Rex returned to duty with a renewed spirit, his probationary period a mere formality that allowed him to ease back into the rhythm of police work. The specialized training focused on desensitization techniques and advanced behavioral conditioning, making him even more resilient and adaptable. He continued to serve the community with the same dedication and bravery that had always defined him, his reputation not just restored, but elevated by the ordeal. The incident had served as a harsh but ultimately valuable lesson for the entire department, highlighting the complexities of K9 operations and the need for thorough, unbiased investigations. Ethan, the quiet boy who had started it all, continued to visit Rex regularly. Their bond remained special, a unique connection built on a foundation of empathy and understanding. He would bring Rex treats and spend quiet afternoons simply sitting by his side, occasionally recounting school adventures or sharing his latest drawings. These visits were therapeutic for both, a testament to the profound impact a single act of kindness could have. Commander Hayes, though initially hesitant, had watched the events unfold with a growing sense of introspection. He accepted the board's decision, perhaps even understood it on a deeper level. The incident had forced him to look beyond the rigid black and white of regulations and consider the nuanced shades of empathy and context. He learned a valuable lesson in leadership, recognizing the human and animal elements in policing. The story became a local legend, a narrative not just about a police dog, but about the resilience of spirit, the importance of questioning assumptions, and the transformative power of compassion. It underscored that true justice often requires looking beyond superficial judgments, listening to the voiceless, and understanding the full spectrum of events. Rex's journey, marked by hardship and ultimately by triumph, became a symbol of hope. Thank you for watching this incredibly moving story. If Rex's journey touched your heart, please consider giving this video a like, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to our channel for more uplifting tales of courage and connection. We have another incredible story about an unlikely friendship between a rescue animal and a firefighter that you won't want to miss. Click the link in the description to watch it now.